All right, we had a fantastic interview with Areej Ansari. She's a fourth-year student at Western University. She mentioned this video that I saw briefly. The news organizations, smartly and responsibly didn't show all of it, but it shows a guy taking video of three Muslim women walking on a street in London and basically hoping and urging for, how else would I put it, a repeat of the horrific moment that happened on Sunday, the murders of this beautiful, beautiful family. And again, I don't think we're forgetting about the 9-year-old boy, because I think as a father, anybody would, I think about it constantly. And the knowledge as well that he grows up without a sister and without parents. Nadia Hassan is the Chief Operating Officer of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and she's kind enough to take some time to join us now. Nadia, thanks for doing that and making the time on a difficult week, but an important week for voices, so I appreciate you doing so.
Well, thank you for having me. I
mentioned that about the family, and it rocks everybody emotionally, and I think as well that 9-year-old grows up with the knowledge that this was an intentional thing, and accidents happen, and we lose people we love, older and younger than us, when things are accidents sometimes. That's not what this was, and that's an unbelievable burden for a community and for this beautiful kid.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and a lot of people are asking what's going to happen to this 9-year-old. How is he going to be taken care of? How will we break the news to him about what happened, that his family was taken away from him because of Islamophobia and because of a hate that was so disturbed and so deep that it made a man actually get in his truck and mow them down. And these are questions that, we should never have to ask these questions. And we should never be in a position where we have to say to a 9-year-old kid that there is no explanation other than you didn't do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. It was just pure hatred.
You've noted Islamophobia is intensifying, and some of that is online, and I want to get to what we can do. Are you hoping that in the light of this tragedy, we would never say, well, there's no silver lining in this kid losing his family, there's no silver lining with this pain and grief and horror, but can we move the needle the other way? Is it getting enough attention that we just obviously say, I said to our guest in the 645 segment, there's a hell of a lot more of us than there are of this 20-year-old in the truck, and we're just going to have to overpower, the majority is going to have to overpower this minority of racists.
Yeah, I think that is actually a really important thing to remember, because that's the only thing that will help anybody who's close to this family to get through this, because we need that hope. People need to know that this is not who we want to become as a country. But I think you're right in pointing out that online hate is a problem. It's one of the issues that I think has been a recurring problem. This is it's not certain yet what motivated this particular attacker to do what he did. Mm-hmm. And whether he was influenced by online spaces. But we do know that in the past, in Quebec City, for example, when a man walked into a mosque and opened fire on congregants who were there to worship and killed 6 of them, he was very heavily influenced by online hate. We know that the same thing happened in Christchurch. Mm-hmm. Online spaces were a big part of why that terrorist did what he did. And so I think you're right to point out that this is a conversation that we've been having for a long time, but clearly we're not acting on it fast enough to keep a pace with just the rate at which Islamophobia is intensifying in this country.
Nadia Hassan's kind enough to join us, Chief Operating Officer of the National Council of Canadian Muslims on Global News Radio 640 Toronto. I was having a conversation with a Muslim friend of mine. I respect her tremendously, but she laid it out for me. So I'm going to hit you with a question here. She said, Greg, you're not allowed to weigh in to the same degree of what you judge to be racism as I am. And I said, I get it. I understand that. But my argument to her is, we all should be at the table here. We all should be at the table because it's people like me that have to look at other people who look like me, Nadia, and say, what you're doing, forget about just making us look bad. I don't care about appearances. You're contributing you're putting the poison in the water here, even with a bad joke, even with a reference, even with a stare at somebody and a head shake. That's the stuff that's got to stop. And I said to her, if you lose us in that fight, that's not great. I want to be in on that fight with you. What's your perspective on that?
No, absolutely. There's plenty of the problem is big enough and deep enough for us. A lot of people need to be involved in truly eradicating Islamophobia in all of its forms. And like the examples you give are actually really, really salient ones, because those jokes, those references, those little comments here and there that are racist and Islamophobic, that people just kind of casually throw around, around the dinner table or at, in like just in regular conversation, it really speaks to the normalization of a certain kind of dehumanization of a particular group of people. And that is something that we all have a role to play to stop it in its everyday forms.
What are the online steps we take? I mentioned even to Mr. Singh yesterday, and I don't think it's something he can do, and I don't think it's something he can do even if he was prime minister. But the anonymity, it's a disaster online, quite obviously. It makes Twitter a dangerous place, not just for people of color and BIPOC people, but for women. I know I don't get crapped on like they do. I get it. But we can't change that here in Canada. What can we do to monitor? What can we do to police? We still want to have freedom of expression, but that's not what racism is. It spreads hate.
Yeah, I think the anonymity part is these are big questions.
Mm-hmm.
They're really big questions that have implications for things like for our democracy, right? And anonymity is not necessarily a bad thing, because that's how also people who have less power express themselves and whistleblow or call out things in a way that I guess they would feel safer doing. But I think this requires, the problem is it's so urgent. It really requires our leadership, our political leadership, and our government bodies to step up to really tackle it head on and do it in a really thoughtful and rigorous way. So this is not just about, just shutting down, or putting out like careless policies that don't account for, various aspects of this issue. We don't want to, suppress speech either. But what we want to do is to create safer spaces and to limit the ability of, there are clear incitements to violence that are circulating online, and a lot of them are, violence against minority groups. So, like the video that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what I'd say to you. I think the conversation is so important now, but I worry sometimes, and I'm sure I've been guilty of it. We in the media have to keep a spotlight on this, because something big happens, and then the cameras turn, right, and the lead story changes. And even though that happens, there still needs to be a focus. I want to have you back in a few weeks, and this needs to be a progressive scenario. So I know you're doing a lot of interviews this week. The key is we got to keep having these conversations and interviews. Just because nothing happens for 2 weeks in August doesn't mean the hate isn't there, and doesn't mean we're not doing what we can to stamp it out. So I hope you'll come back.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Nadia Hassan is Chief Operating Officer for the National Council of Canadian Muslims.